My point is that the Zetas, which is probably the most brazen, most violent drug cartel out there, they're here. We know Gulf Cartel are operational here in Harris County, and a lot of the others like La Familia. And not only are they here, but they're instrumental with the gangs here and working with MS-13 gangs, local gangs and thugs that the sheriff talked about, and they've become more sophisticated. And so I think a lot of people, when they look at this war raging in Mexico, they think that's very isolated and just, that's not in our country, and it is on our doorstep, but it's not here in the United States. It's certainly not here in Texas. And that's just not true. It is here. They are here. They have a presence here. And the sheriff, Garcia, and I have, again, had a very productive discussion about how best to combat these cartels here in Harris County. I think the COPS program, that's something that certainly needs to be fully funded, that is not being funded right now by the Department of Justice, and so I'll be going back to Washington with that mandate to make sure that Harris County gets that funding. And the relationship with ICE here, I think Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they're under-resourced as well, but the sharing of information I think is very important. It's not where we want it to be. That's something as chairman of oversight for Homeland Security operations I'll be talking to ICE about. That relationship is very important, I think, with the local sheriff's department and police departments. But I can't overemphasize what I see as the growing trend and growing threat of the drug cartels here in the United States. And I think it's just a matter of time before you're going to see, and you're already seeing some of that violence take place here. Sheriff and I talked about specific cases of shootings taking place. We haven't seen the decapitations that you see in Mexico, but the day that starts happening would be a really bad day. We want to prevent that from happening here in the United States. But it's very foreseeable that kind of violence, that cartel-on-cartel, gang-on-gang violence, is going to escalate here in the United States and present from a crime prevention, law enforcement standpoint, it's going to provide a serious challenge, and I think it already is. And so I think that's a lot of what Sheriff Garcia and I talked about. I think he's doing a great job with the resources he has.
Can you give us some examples, this way I guess more for the sheriff, of some cartel violence that has spilled over here into the Houston streets?
Well, the one thing you have to keep in mind is that maybe the cartels themselves aren't necessarily conducting operations here to the extent that they are in Mexico. But you've got to remember that over years, we have seen our common day thugs, gangsters, become much more sophisticated. And they're not doing it by themselves. They're not doing it alone. We believe that there are true relationships developed with international cartels, with local common day thugs that we have here on this side of the border. And that is, we're seeing gangs that we have been dealing with for years go from graffiti to human trafficking, prostitution, significant levels of drug trafficking for what we would have considered a typical street gang. And so that is changing the dynamic. The other thing too I want to point out is that, as the Congressman pointed out, that when Agent Zapata was murdered, we participated in the roundup in Operation Bombardier. We participated in a roundup of individuals that had relationships with the folks that were responsible for that assassination, and so we wouldn't have to do that if there was some degree of presence in our community.
How many cartel members have you arrested?
I can't give you the numbers exactly, and I can't tell you if we have identified them as cartel members, but we have identified them as people that we would consider to be gangsters under the Texas Code, and under Operation Bombardier, I think there was 30-some-odd people that were rounded up in that particular operation.
So I guess they're not necessarily active themselves, but they're using the street gangs as proxies.
That's been a trend that we've seen for years.
Okay.
Yeah, the other points I want to make was the increase. Well, we've seen a decrease in number of arrests of illegals crossing. The number of special interest aliens, and those are aliens from countries of interests that have ties to terrorism, like Afghanistan, Pakistan. That number has increased by 37%. And so that's something, in addition to the drug cartel threat, that's another threat that we're keeping our eye on. I know the sheriff is, we're trying to get those specific numbers from ICE so we can analyze those in terms of, we talked about specific arrests that he has made of people from Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's a big concern because Harris County, New York and DC are always going to be top of the list, but Houston, the Christmas bomber had to decide, am I going to go to Houston or to Detroit? The Detroit ticket was cheaper, so he went to Detroit instead. But make no mistake, there is a threat here in the Houston area. We know from Bin Laden's compound that the 4th of July is supposed to be a special day for them, so we're on a certain kind of a higher sense of alert with that. And I think the growing trend of more of these special interest aliens crossing into the United States is a real concern that we need to analyze this data and make sure we're protecting Americans. Lastly, I want to commend the sheriff for his operations in terms of seizing drugs and cash. He has increased his canine capability, and I think we look at the border. $30 billion in cash is estimated to go southbound into Mexico, along with weapons. And if we can seize that cash, just a fraction of that cash, and the weapons going south, which literally fund and arm them, we can really choke the lifeblood from the cartels. And I think the sheriff, not only, we're not right on the border here, but he's doing a great job trying to confiscate that cash that would be going south into Mexico. And I believe he got a pretty sizable check that came back to the Harris County Sheriff's Department. And I believe if we can seize that cash, not only do we win against the cartels, but then we can pay for our operations, our security operations here in the United States.
Can I clarify that? You said that Pakistan, people from Pakistan coming in over the border, or are they flying in? I mean, I want, because we've heard rumors about people coming in, terrorists coming across the border, but right. Is that what you're finding?
They have come across the border. They've also come in through other means, and some with student visas. So some are coming in legally, some are crossing illegally across the southwest border. But the presence and the numbers have increased, and that's a trend that I don't like to see.
What initiated this partnership, per se, if you will, between you law enforcement, and also the sheriff here? Was it the need for more awareness, or to get the word out to Washington, or is it the issue of the cartel?
Well, I chair oversight on Homeland Security Committee, so I basically I provide oversight over all Homeland Security operations for the nation. And so, obviously, Houston being what it is, and the critical infrastructures here are of real concern to the Homeland Security Committee. And I think meeting with my local sheriff is a pretty good idea to talk to him about, what issues, where can I help you with the federal agencies like ICE, like the DOJ, COP grant program. And that's where this is, this relationship is this two-way street of communication. How can I help you with the federal agencies, have greater participation and help at the federal level? And then, what are you seeing on the ground? That's important for me to know. I mean, the sheriff's office is really the eyes and ears on the ground. Maybe the FBI or ICE, they don't see all this stuff all the time. But, the deputy sheriff on the ground or the state troopers are going to see a lot more than I think a lot of these federal guys in Washington. And so, I had a hearing recently where we talked about the growing threat from Mexico. I had Steve McCraw, the director of DPS, and border sheriffs talk about what are they seeing happening. And they're seeing an increased amount of violence coming across into the United States. And I think that's an important story to get out and for them to tell, because they see it every day.
So will this partnership lead to more funding then for Harris County to combat?
Well, that's our goal, and we have, we got a pretty unified delegation on these issues. I mean, it's very, we work very effectively together, and I think the issue I was not aware of was the fact of the COPS grant program that the sheriff identified. Because there's a hiring freeze, DOJ is not treating those as lost employees, and so therefore they're not providing the COP grant funding that they should. So that's something, a good example, just one issue that I can take back to Washington with the delegation and hopefully change that policy.
And let me also add that as a sheriff of Harris County, I welcome Congressman McCall's proactive visitation to the sheriff's office. It is good to have a member of Congress with his responsibility to come into our community to offer the kind of support that we've been that we need. Since I've been sheriff, my interest has always been to make sure that we protect Harris County from international and domestic terrorism. We have tremendous critical infrastructure. The Port of Houston, we're the lead agency in the Port of Houston, but because of the forced hiring freeze and attrition, we need to do more for the Port of Houston. That's an important commodity that we cannot let anyone bring harm to. And so to have Congressman McCall come down and say, how can we help? And one of the issues that we have in front of us is the fact that we have not been able to get the Department of Justice to fund our COPS initiatives is music to my ears, and it should be music to the citizens of Harris County's ears, to have his leadership and his advocacy, especially in the role that he serves in Congress.
You know, the other point is, Houston's been identified as one of the top cities under what they call the Urban Area Security Initiatives. So that's a grant program that we established in the Congress after 9/11 to help harden and protect critical infrastructures in the United States. Harris County, with the Port of Houston, as the sheriff mentioned, is continues to be a target. And I was pleased to see that Harris County did receive what they call UASI grants to help further protect all the critical infrastructures you have here. The port is obviously the #1 priority. And it controls, if you look at the nation's energy supply, the majority of the nation's energy supply goes through that port. If that was, and I think the terrorists are aware of that, if that was somehow crippled or the flow was stopped, you could cripple the nation in terms of energy. So, I believe that, lawmakers and the administration understand that's why Harris County is on a higher priority list of areas that need to be protected. And so that's been a good partnership we've had, again, with the local sheriff and police department, that we can get that kind of funding, which is really important and can fund things that we talked about, like some of these new helicopters coming out that are unmanned aerial helicopters that are more cost effective from a fuel standpoint, and maintenance are a lot cheaper, but they can be the eyes of the sky looking at security around the port.
Coming from your position, with Homeland Security, that background, what would you say then to those who are members of the cartel who are moving around here in Harris County?
That we're gonna, we're aware of their presence. Everything within my power, and I think the sheriff as well, that we're gonna bring them to justice, and we don't want to see them here. We don't want to see that spillover from Mexico, and it's a regional issue. It's not just Mexico; it's south of. We don't want to see them here, and it's a very complex issue. But I think with greater law enforcement tools and resources, we can defeat them.
Same question to you.
I'll be a little bit more specific. We'll put their butts in jail. We don't want them in Harris County. We don't want them to bring harm. We don't want them to deteriorate our quality of life. And with the support and backing of Congressman McCall, we're going to keep Harris County one of the safest counties in America.